Welcome back to Lincolnshire for round 4 of the 2017 Maxxis DTRA UK National Flat Track Championship. For the first time this season, we move away from what are considered short tracks. It's the Greenfield TT that puts a new spin on oval racing, with an infield section featuring a right-hand turn and jump. That always shakes up the field, handing the advantage to riders who have motocross experience. And we'll see what it does in terms of the championship standings, because the top 2 in the series overall come level into the round that will see us to the halfway point in this season's calendar. This time last season, Alan Birtwistle stepped it up a gear with the first of 3 victories to seal a first crown, while his main rival Aidan Collins could only finish 9th on that occasion. TT events are always about damage limitation for him. Collins lining up off the middle row for this opening race of the day. Just 6 riders drawn in heat number 1, 9 drawn into heat number 2, so this should be a bumper points haul for all of the riders featuring here in heat number 1. Lining up then for the opening race of the day. 3 rounds of heats as ever, getting underway here at the Greenfield TT. Fast start from the outside of the front row from Michael Dijkstra, but the inside advantage is with Gerard Bijlo, who leads them through the infield section for the first time. Bijlo in front, second place with Dijkstra. Battle going on out at the back as Peter Boast tries to get the better of Scott Faulkner and move himself out of the basement position, but Boast is held at bay in the early stages of this race. Battle now on for second position as Gary Birtwistle tries to fight his way up the inside of Michael Dijkstra, and further back Peter Boast has now released himself from the clutches of Scott Faulkner, moving through around the outside of turn number 1, and Gary Birtwistle looking to the outside line now on Michael Dijkstra, and through he comes down the home straight with a look over his shoulder. And I do suspect that Gary Birtwistle was being held up for a while there behind Michael Dijkstra, because immediately as he pulled past the Dutchman, he powered off and into the distance. The question now is whether Aidan Collins will also be able to find a way through and move himself up into a double-figure points-paying position, with 3rd place currently being held by Dijkstra. 4th place then with Aidan Collins, 5th with Peter Boast, and rounding out the finishers as things stand, Scott Faulkner, who's now dropped well back from Boasty, and Boast can't seem to gain in lost ground on Aidan Collins, so things are settling down, and it's only the race for 3rd position that looks likely to change in the latter stages of this race. Gary Birtwistle has pulled well clear now from Michael Dijkstra and does seem to be gaining some ground on Gerard Bijlo. Has a beautiful style through that right-hander. 3rd position with Michael Dijkstra still. Aidan Collins losing ground each time he goes over that jump, and that's as we expect really. A rider who never favoured the TT when we had a TT round at Kings Lynn, and struggled last season here at the Greenfield TT. Collins sitting in 4th place. That's probably a fairly solid result for him in his opening outing. Closing in between the top 2 here. Gary Birtwistle less than a bike length behind as they go around the pits turn for the final time, but he's not close enough to land a blow. And it's Gerard Bijlo of Spain who takes the checkered flag in heat number 1 after his 2nd place at round 3. It's a good start once again for the Spaniard. 2nd over the line Gary Birtwistle, 3rd going the way of Michael Dijkstra, who successfully holds off Aidan Collins, and then an isolated finish for Peter Boast in P5 ahead of Scott Faulkner, who rounds out the finishers. So a good ride there from Gary Birtwistle, working his way through from the middle row, very swiftly getting the better of Michael Dijkstra, powering away from him, but in the end coming up short against Gerard Bijlo. But plenty of pace being shown there by Gary Birtwistle. A good start for him in heat number 1. Bijlo getting there ahead of Birtwistle in 2nd, Dijkstra in 3rd, Collins, Boast and Faulkner occupying the minor placings in heat number 1. Well, as I said, a larger entry for heat number 2 than heat 1, just the way that the draw has panned out here, and that means it's going to be harder for the riders in heat 2 to pick up points than it was for their counterparts in the opening race of the day. Alan Birtwistle, the reigning champion, winner of round number 3, hopes to pick up where he left off at Greenfield on the oval and transfer that form onto the TT. He lines up off the middle row. He has a similar scorecard here to his main championship rival Aidan Collins, who lined up off the middle row in the opening race of the day. Kai Fort, Sam Hurst and Mike Hill off the front row. Toby Hales and Alan Birtwistle off the middle row, with Leia Toclub on the inside of them. The back row is with Richard Roden, Tom Clements and Richard Mason. Watch out for Mason, who took his only podium finish of the season last year here at the Greenfield TT. Has made a good start, immediately challenging for 5th place around turns 1 and 2. Alan Birtwistle, meanwhile, has worked his way through up to 3rd place, challenging Kai Fort as they come over the jump, and Birtwistle has gone around the outside of Fort down into the pits turn. So it's Mike Hill who leads. He's made the early break. Alan Birtwistle in second. Then there's a big train of riders from third position down, and it's Richard Roden who sits at the back of the pack trying to chase down Leia Toklov as Mike Hill loses some of that early buffer to Alan Birtwistle in second, and third, fourth and fifth in particular really close now. Richard Mason looking for the inside line down into the pits turn, but he's held at bay. Alan Birtwistle going off in pursuit of Mike Hill. He's going to look down the inside into turn one. Hill's left too much room, then looks over his shoulder, realises that Birtwistle is alongside him and settles back down into second position. Meanwhile, Kai Fort losing it a little bit on the infield section there, holds up Toby Hales. That gives the run to Richard Mason, who's through down the inside. Hales, though, bursting back around the outside. So still this good race going on for third, fourth and fifth positions. Mason thinking about a lunge down into turn number one. Hales going around the outside of Fort. Fort moves to block, then locks up slightly. Mason's got the run again down the inside line. Richard Mason not quite getting the jump there, and Toby Hales has the outside line. Mason, though, threw up the inside of Kai Fort. Runs a little bit wide there on the exit of the final turn, and Toby Hales is back down the inside of Mason once again. So Hales and Mason have both made their way successfully past Kai Fort, and Sam Hurst is trying to do the same now. Both of those riders who've made progression trying to get the better of Mike Hill, who's next in line, and Hill sitting in second place, and immediately those two riders gaining on him as they drop Kai Fort into the final lap. So the race for second, third and fourth positions now, as it was for third, fourth and fifth before. Hill losing his footing slightly as he comes around that tight left-hander. Of course, the first turn tightening off then into the infield section, and Hill dropping back over the jump, and it's going to be Toby Hales who takes second position, Richard Mason in third and Mike Hill in fourth place. A long wait then for Kai Fort, who does hold on ahead of Sam Hurst, and the minor positions being occupied by Leia Toklov and Richard Roden, who remained unchanged in terms of their positions from the end of the opening lap. But up front it was all going on, frantic position changes. Alan Birtwistle working his way through and getting the better of Mike Hill, and then Hill losing out 2 places in the latter stages to eventually drop to fourth. Toby Hales and Richard Mason working their way through, and all the while, firstly on the tail of Kai Fort and then on the tail of Mike Hill, they were doing battle with one another as well. So great racing over what eventually turned into second position. There were a couple of opportunistic moves from Richard Mason, seeing that Toby Hales was being held back by Kai Fort, but in the end Mason misses out, finishing in third place. Big move down the inside in the early parts of the race from Alan Birtwistle gave him his first checkered flag of the day. It was pretty straightforward really, with Mike Hill leaving the door wide open and Birtwistle scything straight through. So the standings after the opening round of heats: Alan Birtwistle and Gerard Bilo, the first race winners. Gary Birtwistle and Toby Hales taking second place. Richard Mason and Michael Dijkstra with a third place apiece. Those riders then sit in the top 6 positions. Those are the double-figure scorers. The target for the riders, of course, is to pick up a double-figure tally in each of their rides, and that will be enough to assure them of progression through direct to the grand final. Only the top 10 make it automatically, and the rest of the riders will have to go in the last chance qualifier to try and occupy the final 2 positions on the grid for the final, which is where the championship points will be awarded. Lining up now for Heat 3, Toby Hales is the lone rider off the front row. Mike Hill on the outside and Tom Clemens on the inside of the middle row. And the back row is power-packed with Alan Birtwistle and Aidan Collins, currently tied championship leaders on 48 points apiece. Collins with the marginally faster start, but he's on the outside line. Both have blasted clear of Scott Faulkner, who's relegated to the back. It's Toby Hales who gets the whole shot ahead of Mike Hill. Another strong start for him. The race is over third position, or perhaps over second now, as Alan Birtwistle clears the jump and looks up to the outside line and makes his way through to second place. Aidan Collins, meanwhile, has been relegated to the back, so it really did all go wrong for Collins over the jump there. He's had to work hard to get the better of Scott Faulkner, and Tom Clemens has worked his way through to fourth position in all of that, and now sits on the tail of Mike Hill up in third. This is the smaller of the 2 races in round number 2, heat number 3, followed by heat 4 next time out, which has the larger entry. Once again, that's just the way the draw is stacked down, but it's Toby Hales blasting away out in front. It's Alan Birtwistle pursuing him in second. We've got a pack of 3 riders then from third position down to fifth, and that's where Aidan Collins is on the tail of that group, looking to find his way through. Hill doing a good job after picking up 9 points first time out. If he can stay where he is now, that's going to be another bumper haul of points for him. Collins looking to the outside of Tom Clemens as they head towards the infield section. Clemens loses it slightly. Collins has the momentum, but then he loses it again in the run-up to the jump, just lacks confidence through that infield section, and Clemens tries to pull clear once again. Collins is, though, right on his tail as they come down the home straight, looks down to the inside, and this is standard oval racing down into turn 1, and Collins makes his way through for 4th position. Has he got enough to gain ground on Mike Hill in the latter part of this race as well? That remains to be seen. A bit of a buffer for the number 35 up in 3rd position. Collins trying to work hard as they run down towards the final lap. The front 2 have broken well clear. The race now is over 3rd position. Hill holding on valiantly. Collins seems the faster of the 2. Gets a good run there off the left-hander, but again loses ground in the run-up to the jump. Up front, it's Toby Hales taking the checkered flag. Alan Birtwistle restricted to 2nd place. A long wait for 3rd place, but it's going to be Mike Hill only just ahead of Aidan Collins. And Collins with a couple of solid efforts, to be fair, in his opening 2 rides. 9 points in each appearance. His final ride in heat number 5 will see him go off the front row. So all is not lost by far for Aidan Collins, who looks set to make automatic progression to the grand final if he can keep up his run of solid point scoring. Toby Hales, though, the winner of heat number 3. 3rd different race winner in 3 races, with Alan Birtwistle suffering his first defeat of the day. Mike Hill gets 3rd place. That moves him on to 19 points from 2 rides. That's a strong effort for the rider of the number 35 bike. And he finishes ahead of Aidan Collins, Tom Clemens and Scott Faulkner in heat number 3. Lining up for heat 4. The front row features Peter Boast on the inside, Richard Roden and Gary Birtwistle on the outside of him on that front row. The middle row featuring Kai Fort, Richard Mason, Gerard Bilo and Michael Dijkstra. That's a powered-packed, international-looking middle row. And the back row featuring Leah Toklove and Sam Hurst, the last rider to settle into line. Well, the riders are under starters' orders then and underway. Gary Birtwistle with a supreme start from the rubbered line on the outside. Peter Boast left too much room on the inside, and Richard Mason has come through, and Gerard Bilo's bundled past as well. Boast was trying to challenge Birtwistle, moved up wider than he should have done and left too much room on the inside line. Mason, the first to capitalise, is right on the tail of Gary Birtwistle. Gerard Bilo pulling clear. It's Peter Boast relegated from the front row down to 4th position. There's a separate battle further down the order, and right at the back of the field, Richard Roden under pressure from Sam Hurst looking to the outside line around the first 2 turns. Michael Dijkstra tucked in behind Peter Boast. Leah Toklove behind them, and then that side-by-side fight as they head down towards the pit's bend. The front 3 have broken well clear. Peter Boast is leading the trailing group, and the race at the moment is over 2nd position with Richard Mason holding off Gerard Bilo. Again, Bilo looks supreme through the right-hander. The speed he carries and the way he flips the bike from one side to the other, it's impressive and athletic stuff from Gerard Bilo, but at the moment he hasn't got the answer to Richard Mason, and that's enabling Gary Birtwistle to pull away out in front. Bilo looking to the inside there, but Mason still has the racing line, still has the position, and still looks comfortable. Peter Boast is pulling clear now of the rest of that group, so he's looking good for the points in this one, ahead of Michael Dijkstra, Sam Hurst and Leah Toklove, with Richard Roden stuck down towards the back of the field. Still the race is over 2nd place. Still Gary Birtwistle is pulling well clear out in front, but this is the closest Gerard Bilo has been so far to P2. Has the Spaniard got the answer? He goes in much harder into the pits turn than Richard Mason, but Mason seems the smoother of the 2, and he's holding on into the final lap. Race over 2nd position. Bilo looking to the inside line then, but Mason still holding on well, and it doesn't look as though this position is going to change, even though Bilo is as close as he's been all race. He gets a good jump. Wow, the depth of his landing, and he looks to the outside line with a cutback move coming off the final turn, but Mason has the rubbered in line and has the run down to the checkered flag. Bilo tried absolutely everything there. Peter Boast over the line in 4th position, eventually some way adrift of the top 3, and particularly that race for 2nd and 3rd position, which caught our focus there. Boast with the 9 race points then to add to the 8 points first time out. He has a middle row grid slot in his final outing. Bilo restricted in his 2nd outing after winning impressively in heat number 1. So we've had 4 different race winners in the 4 heats so far, and that suggests we are going to be in for a lively affair when we get down towards the grand final. Gary Birtwistle then moving on to 27 points, and that ties him with Toby Hales and Alan Birtwistle. The top 3 in the heat point standings have all won 1 race apiece and finished 2nd in their other ride. But what a fast start that was from Gary Birtwistle, all the way from the outside there, cutting across. Richard Mason then coming down the inside of Peter Boast, who'd left too much room and ended up dropping from the front row down to 4th. So as I said, it's the Birtwhistles and Toby Hales who top the point standings ahead of Gerard Bilo, who dropped 5 points last time out in Heat 4. Bit of a gap to the rest of the pack. Richard Mason with 2 solid rides. Mike Hill, Michael Dijkstra, Aidan Collins, Peter Boast rounding out the top 10 as things stand. And that might be as you would have expected things. Mike Hill has put in a stronger performance so far here today than his championship standing would suggest, and it's been a good day for him so far, but he appears off the back row here in this one, heat number 5, and this will be the litmus test as to whether he can make automatic progression to today's grand final. The front row will feature a few big hitters here. Aidan Collins on the inside, Richard Mason alongside, and Alan Birtwistle on the outside. The middle row featuring Sam Hurst and Richard Roden, and the back row, Mike Hill, Kai Fort and Gary Birtwistle. So it's Gary Birtwistle who's up against it here really, off that back row. Made such a sensational start last time out in Heat 4 to work his way through, and if he wants to move through as one of the top seeds, he's got to make progression from the back row, remembering that he's tied with Toby Hales and Alan Birtwistle, and Alan has a front row grid slot, and now he has the whole shot. Richard Mason working his way through, challenging Aidan Collins here for second position. It's Birtwistle and Collins, the top 2 in the championship, who hold the top 2 positions. Richard Mason clatters into the back of Aidan Collins and goes sideways off the jump, and down goes Richard Mason, and that's given Aidan Collins a massive advantage over the rest of the pack. Can he hold on to it for a 12-point score that would assure his progression direct to the grand final on a track which he doesn't really favour? Third position is with Gary Birtwistle, 4th with Richard Roden, Kai Fort holding off Mike Hill, and Hill trying to work his way through from the back of the pack. Well, that's much tougher for him than obviously starting on the front rows of the grid as he did in the opening 2 rounds of heats. Richard Mason is back up and running, but obviously a lap behind, despite sitting right in the pack behind Gary Birtwistle, who's closing on Aidan Collins now. The race is for second position, with Gary Birtwistle looking for the 12 race points. Aidan Collins holding him off for the moment, but you can see that the large gap that Collins had after the chaos over the jump on the opening lap, well, that's been eroded. Gary Birtwistle's now gone alongside. Collins can't even think about a move back down the inside into the right-hander, because Gary Birtwistle it is who has the pace and pulls clear. Now it's just a question of whether the rest of the group can also gain on Aidan Collins. Richard Mason directly behind him, but don't be put off by Mason, because he is a lap down on the rest of the runners, and he just continuing on in this race to try and finish and pick up some race points to aid his challenge towards, of course, the grand final. Leader now into the final lap, that's Alan Birtwistle. No great surprise, he has performed immaculately here today, and off the front row it was never in too much doubt as to whether he would be able to hit the front. He already pulled off a 12-point haul from his back row grid slot back in heat number 3 and looks set to become the top seed towards today's grand final. Second over the line, Gary Birtwistle. That should be a front row grid slot for him, and Aidan Collins takes third position, enough for him to move with a direct transfer through to the final, which can never be guaranteed in a TT event for Aidan Collins. He does tend to struggle on this type of circuit, but things have fallen his way through the heat program, and with 28 points that should be enough for him to move through. Just discussing the incident there with Richard Mason in the early stages of the race. Aidan Collins, he got it slightly wrong, I think there. Richard Mason didn't anticipate the extent to which Collins was going to slow down for that jump, just clipped the back of him, and tangled up in that mess was Gary Birtwistle, who did well to recover and take the second position. In fact, we're going to see it again here. Collins had P2, of course he'd started on the front row. Richard Mason was gaining ground. He was on the right-hand side, just behind Aidan Collins, and he clips the back wheel of Collins, and you can see that Gary Birtwistle gets caught up in that. Sam Hurst caught up in it as well, and that's why Sam Hurst ended up scoring just 5 race points in that one, heat number 5. Straight into line now for the last of the heat races. Heat number 6. Leah Toklove and Tom Clements off the front row. Peter Boast and Scott Faulkner off the middle. Michael Dijkstra, Gerard Bilo and Toby Hales off the back row. Remember, the riders aren't just thinking about that automatic progression through to the final, they're also thinking about scoring as many points as possible to get the best possible seeding position and the best possible start position, therefore, for the final. Watch for Gerard Bilo and Toby Hales, 2 of the favourites going off the back row here. They immediately make progress from the start. Peter Boast with a good one as well. He occupies second position in the early part of the race behind Tom Clements, who makes the early break. Third position is with Leah Toklov. Challenged on the inside now by Michael Dijkstra, but Toklov gets the better jump and holds on to P3 around the outside of the Dutchman for that third position. Her best effort of the day so far, having scored just 11 points from the opening 2 rounds of heat. She sits in third place as down goes Gerard Bailo. The Spaniard had worked his way up to P5, challenging on the tail of Michael Dijkstra, just gets it wrong. Going down into turn number 1, he slipped off at the back of the field, rejoins the race, and it's going to take a miracle now for him to work his way through and try and assure himself of a front row grid slot. Toby Hales, by contrast, has gained a position, of course, through that fall, and now is challenging on the tail of Michael Dijkstra. Hales, remember, can actually become top seed, joint with Alan Birtwistle, but only if he can win this heat number 6, and that's looking increasingly unlikely. Tom Clemens looking comfortable out in front. Peter Bose riding a good race in second. Leah Toklov in third is where the group starts to form itself. Toklov, Dijkstra and Hales on the tail of that duo. Dijkstra had a go at trying to pass Leah Toklov in the early part of the race, but has started to drop back slightly now, and it looks as though Toby Hales is the rider on the move as he looks to the inside of Michael Dijkstra, and Peter Bose meanwhile is right tucked up within a bike length of Tom Clemens out in front. We've got 2 races in one. Clemens holding off Bose. Hales as close as he's been to Michael Dijkstra, who in turn has closed back in now on Leah Toklov. We've got quite a race developing in the latter stages of this one, heat number 6. Both being dropped ever so slightly around the pits turn as they head now into the final lap. Toby Hales still trying to find a way past Michael Dijkstra. He's been held up for the entire duration of this race, but he's got a good run through the infield section. Dijkstra in turn goes for the inside on Leah Toklov, and Dijkstra loses it at the back end of the jump, trying to find his way past down the inside of Leah Toklov. That's going to cost Dijkstra an absolute bundle of points. It's also going to mean that riders around him will gain from that, not least Gerard Bailo, who of course had suffered his own fall in the early part of the race. Peter Bose gives congratulations to Tom Clemens, who holds on for a first race victory of the season in the 2017 championship, ahead of Peter Bose in second position. Both of those riders should now march on towards the grand final as they score ahead of Leah Toklov. Toby Hales picking up the 9 race points in the end. He must have had a heart-in-mouth moment there as Michael Dijkstra fell. He has been awarded the 6 race points, somewhat fortuitously, because he certainly didn't make it over the finish line, but he is classified behind Scott Faulkner and behind Gerard Bailo. Well, here's another look at the fall. On board with Toby Hales this is, as Gerard Bailo just scrubs out and down he goes. And that's 2 riders Toby Hales ended up having to avoid because Michael Dijkstra fell in the latter part of the race. But Toby Hales benefits to score 9 race points. His weakest tally of the heat programme, but enough to qualify through as the 3rd seed to the grand final. Here it is then, Alan Birtwistle ahead of Gary Birtwistle and Toby Hales. Those will be the first 3 riders out to select their starting positions for the final, along with Gerard Bailo. Tom Clemens, Peter Bose, Aidan Collins and Richard Mason. Mike Hill is the last rider to take automatic qualification, along with Scott Faulkner. Well, only 2 further riders could make it through from the LCQ. It was a fast start from Michael Dijkstra ahead of Leah Toklov. Sam Hurst holding 3rd position in the early part of the race, so Dijkstra picking himself up well from the incident to occupy top spot. An attempted overtaking manoeuvre down the inside for 3rd position for Kai Fort. Meanwhile, we'd lost Richard Roden just in the run down to the first turn with a mechanical issue, and that narrowed the field somewhat, also guaranteeing that Richard Roden would finish in 15th and last position in round 4 of the series. Well, Sam Hurst made swift progress, thundered down the inside of Michael Dijkstra, moved the Dutchman aside on the pits turn. Leah Toklov moved through into one of the 2 provisional qualification positions, and that was the last of the overtaking manoeuvres, meaning that both Sam Hurst and Leah Toklov marched on to the grand final. Michael Dijkstra and Kai Fort eliminated. On to the final, where the bulk of the championship points will be awarded here at Greenfield TT for round 4 of the 2017 Maxxis DTRA UK Flat Track Nationals. The riders spilling out onto the circuit will select their starting positions in seeding order. So it's Alan Birtwistle first up to choose. It looks as though he's going for the run on the rubbered-in line towards the outside of that front row. Gary Birtwistle lining up directly on the inside of him, and Toby Hales fancies having the muscle advantage down to turn 1. He goes off the very inside, which is going to present Gerard Bilo with a decent starting position there. So Bilo, despite scoring just 7 points in heat number 6, managed to make it into the top 4 and gets himself a front row grid slot. Bagging a middle row grid slot is Aidan Collins, and that's a solid result for him. He was 8th of the qualifiers, tied with Richard Mason on points, but in fact gets the advantage in terms of starting position because Mason was outscored by Collins in heat number 5. So it's Collins on the inside, Mason alongside him, Tom Clements then and Peter Boast off the outside of that middle row, and the back row completed by Leah Toklove, Sam Hurst, Mike Hill and Scott Faulkner. That's the full lineup for the grand final, which gets underway with a good start from Gary Birtwistle, but it's Alan Birtwistle who sweeps across the front of him. They're 3 abreast coming towards the infield section. That can only end in tears. It's Gary Birtwistle who's managed to break clear. Toby Hales sitting up in 3rd position. Richard Mason challenging around the outside, and Toby Hales then goes square, catches the back wheel of Richard Mason and drops back on board with Hales as Gerard Bilo comes through. So Bilo now up into 4th position behind Richard Mason, who's made a good fist of the start. Recovering well, of course. He was restricted to a middle row grid slot after his crash in heat number 5, from which he recovered to 6 race points. But it's Richard Mason showing that those seeding positions don't mean too much as he works his way through into a provisional podium position. Race at the moment on for 3rd place between Gerard Bilo and Richard Mason. Also Toby Hales joining in. He's on the back of that group. It's still anyone's game in terms of those podium positions. Alan Birtwistle leading. Gary Birtwistle in 2nd. Alan has got a rear gunner once again. Richard Mason in 3rd ahead of Gerard Bilo and Toby Hales, and then a separate group further back with Aidan Collins putting in a good ride on the tail of Tom Clements. Peter Boast couldn't find a way past Clements in heat number 6 as Clements took the checkered flag, and Boast further back in this one, the grand final. This race not going at all to plan for him. Another poor start. Boast just doesn't seem to get out of the start line well enough in the grand finals, and that's what's costing him once again here. After qualifying 6th seed in the heat stages, he sits down the order in 9th position and on the tail of Sam Hurst, who's made a good start. Up front, no change. Alan Birtwistle pulling clear. Gary Birtwistle dropping back slightly now into the clutches of Richard Mason, although just as I say that, Mason loses it slightly coming towards the infield section, and Mason under some pressure. Tom Clements under pressure as well from Aidan Collins. Leah Toklove with a good break. Sam Hurst just behind her at the moment, trying to find his way through, and Peter Boast further back through the field. Not a good start at all for Boasty. Toby Hales running wide there around turn 2 because Gerard Bilo had locked it sideways, trying to get his momentum up to carry through the jump. But it's Alan Birtwistle, the full length of a straight now, ahead of Gary Birtwistle in 2nd. Richard Mason looks odds-on favourite for a podium position, which would be his first of 2017, and in fact his first since the TT here at Greenfield last season. He's pursued valiantly by Gerard Bilo in 4th position, and then in 5th place by Toby Hales. But this is not a good race for Hales in the context of the championship. He came into this one just 3 points ahead of Richard Mason, and Mason is going to turn the tables in pursuit of a top 3 space in this 2017 campaign. Gary Birtwistle is going to have a good result in the context of his championship as well. Picked up his first double-figure tally yesterday at round 3 of the season, and now at round 4 looks set for his best result of the campaign so far with P2 ahead of Richard Mason. Then this will turn the season on its head somewhat, particularly with Aidan Collins well down the field and still unable to negotiate Tom Clements. And there's a separate group further down the order led by Clements, and then of course with Boast, with Leah Toklove all in the mix. There's Toklove just ahead of Scott Faulkner, who's the first of the lap runners. We have already seen Mike Hill struggling and coming down, so that's going to affect his chances of a big points haul here. Alan Birtwistle then heading away out in front. Still Aidan Collins on the tail of Tom Clements as they go into the final lap. There's Leah Toklove at the back of that group further up through the field. Alan Birtwistle is going to come through to lap her. Then it's Gary Birtwistle, Richard Mason, Gerard Bilo, Toby Hales. Still no changes. They come towards the checkered flag. Birtwistle wins it. Second over the line is Gary Birtwistle. Third going the way of Richard Mason. Gary's delighted with his efforts there, and Alan will be equally pleased. That's a second race victory in succession, and back-to-back 20-point hauls, particularly with Aidan Collins restricted to third in each of the two previous rounds and off the podium for the first time at round number 4. No great surprise that Collins is out of the big hitters for the TT event. He will hope to mount his assault in the second half of the campaign, but so far 2017 is following a similar pattern to 2016. Collins first out of the blocks, but Alan Birtwistle building it up as the campaign goes on. And here at Greenfield this weekend, he has certainly shown all of the pace and all of the class of the reigning champion. So it's Alan Birtwistle then with the lap of honour and with the checkered flag. He opens his championship lead up to 11 points, having come into this event tied on points, remember, with Aidan Collins. Alan Birtwistle taking the checkered flag ahead of Gary Birtwistle and Richard Mason, who comprised the podium. Gerard Bilo and Toby Hales narrowly missing out, and then there was a separate group further down the order from 6th position back, with Tom Clemens holding on for his best result of the campaign so far, ahead of Aidan Collins, Sam Hurst and Peter Boast, who eventually does get the better of Leah Toklove and Scott Faulkner and Mike Hill.
Yeah, definitely. I was looking forward to coming here because I did a lot of motocross in my background, so I like the TTs. And yeah, I think it's just that confident. If you turn up somewhere confident before you get there, it's going to be a lot easier. But it could have gone either way today. The pace was really hot. And no, it was a case of not making a mistake. I managed to get a really good start off the second row, which was like super fortunate, and then just didn't make a mistake. And I was hoping a mistake was going to come from the guys in front, but Gary never put a wheel wrong, so you know, fair play to him and Bertie. So it was a case of just bringing it home in third and getting some points for the championship.
I'm never really going to match his pace. He's always going to pull away from me, but off the start I just sort of tried to make myself a bit wide and moved over on a few people, but that's all part of the game, isn't it? But yeah, felt steady all day. Riding 2 classes was good. I felt dialed into the track, and yeah. Normally I'll make a mistake in a 12-lap final, but I felt real dialed in, and it was good.
Yeah, it looked like that, but it was pretty nerve-wracking. I knew a few of these boys were going to be on it. Toby and Gerard and Richard and Gary, they were all on it today, and basically a lot of it was on the start and the final, so I knew that basically I had to get through clean in all the heats. So there was a good chance of contact and going down in the heat, so I had to just get through clean, get first pick on the grid and get off the line, and that was key. But I managed to have the pace in the final. I had my brother backing me up, so it worked perfect.
So after defeats in the opening 2 rounds of the 2017 season at the hands of his main championship rival Aidan Collins, Alan Birtwistle returns to form over the Greenfield weekend with wins at both rounds 3 on the oval and round 4 on the TT circuit. And it's Alan Birtwistle who takes control of the championship with an 11-point margin heading into the second half of the campaign. We still have visits to the Amman Valley circuit that will play a crucial role in the context of the championship, and to Eastbourne in the closing stages of the campaign. But for the moment, it's Alan Birtwistle who sits in command, and Richard Mason and Gary Birtwistle with strong performances and podium finishes at round number 4, gain in the battle for 3rd position on Toby Hales. So plenty still to be decided in this 2017 campaign.